Hi VC, I'm back and freshly vaccinated. One of the few benefits of being over 50 as I jumped the queue there. And I thought I would come back with some original 60s, early 70s psych to show you. Got a dozen or so records here, so let's get started. First off, this is a band who actually played at Woodstock, and they're called Quill. And interesting album art there. I think that's supposed to spell out the band name. Dull as ditch water back cover. And yay, it's a Unipack sleeve. Don't we just love those? It's a good album. Came out in 1970. It sort of it straddles the psych, hard rock, prog kind of genres, which a lot of albums did that came out that year. And it's good stuff. There's some pretty hard guitar on it, strong vocals. Doesn't seem to get too much love in the VC, but it's great. Lots of organ, good drumming, creepy sort of atmospheric grooves, and yeah, there's some horns on there, but not intrusive or overpowering like in horn rock. And yeah, thoroughly recommended. Best track on it is probably Yellow Butterfly. Second track on the second side, and it's probably the most psychedelic track on here as well. It's got a touch of early Floyd on there with phased guitar and cello, so good moody piece. And next up, from 1969, it's The Corporation, and this is an original UK pressing on the Capitol label. Now on the back you can see that everyone who ever owned the record before me decided to write their name on it, which is a bit of a pain in the backside, but hey. They've done the same on the front, but because it's front laminated, a bit of acetone on there, I was able to get rid of it all, so it's actually looking quite decent. This is a blues psych album. It's decent without being exceptional. Sometimes it's a bit po-faced. I think they mistake being po-faced with being serious artists, where perhaps they just need to loosen up and experiment a bit more. The best track on here takes up the whole of the B-side, and that's a cover of John Coltrane's India, where they replace all of his saxophone parts with guitar. And that's well worth a listen. So yeah, recommended, but particularly that B-side. And then we have Womb from 1969 also. And this is one of those weird annoying sleeves that appears to be upside down, or is a top opener and has a cutout to retrieve the disc. There it is on the dot label. Quite a cool inner sleeve. And this is a frustrating album. It opens with this really delicate track, acoustic guitar, female vocal, absolutely beautiful. I was thinking, this is going to be an absolute classic. This is gorgeous. Where's this going to go? What a way to start. And then they don't really use the girl singer again, or in a very limited way. And a lot of the vocals are taken on by a guy he's like a male wannabe Janis Joplin, and he spends most of the album going for notes that he never quite reaches and shrieking pretty tunelessly, which isn't much of a recommendation, I know. And on the whole, it's not an exceptional album, but it does have really good moments on it, particularly that first track. And then there's some fairly sort of nice jazzy psych parts, which are a bit reminiscent of Rare Earth, their sort of sound. So I do enjoy it. It's a bit unfocused, and I do need to revisit it because sometimes it takes a bit of time away from a record and to go back to it for it to really kind of show its worth. But certainly check out the first track because it's really rather good. And next up, this is one I do love as much as anything because it's utterly ridiculous, and I do love a ridiculous piece of music. And it is Eric Burdon and the Animals with Winds of Change. And this is a completely different lineup to the Animals that recorded things like House of the Rising Sun. Eric Burdon went off to San Francisco and had some kind of an awakening there and became a poster boy for peace and love. And it's almost embarrassing how enthusiastic he is about that whole scene on this record. It's like seeing your square uncle, go on holiday to Jamaica and come back talking in patois and growing dreadlocks. But because it is so over the top, it is brilliant. It is funny. It is truly psychedelic. It's experimental. Does it stand the test of time? Depends on your taste, I suppose. But I love it. The title track is basically a roll call of all of Eric's new heroes. So you get Jimi Hendrix and the Mamas and the Papas and all these people getting a name check, and it's almost just a spoken word shopping list of people he'd like to hang out with. I'm probably being a bit harsh on him because he was hanging out with them and he was a big star in his own right. There's sitar on here. There's what sounds like hurdy-gurdy. Lots of studio trickery, sound effects. There's a track on here called The Black Plague, which has to be heard to be believed, and it's this completely straight-faced gothic narration of a castle which has been overrun with the Black Death, and it makes Spinal Tap seem restrained. It's absolutely brilliant. And then he does a cover of Paint It Black on here, which is a great interpretation of the song. There's a song called Yes I Am Experienced, where he's basically telling Jimi Hendrix, I'm not just a kind of a wannabe, I'm the real deal. And I'm sure he did plenty of catching up and became part of the in crowd. But it is fantastic. Bits of it, trying to look at my notes here. Bits of it almost sound like a spaghetti western soundtrack. It's got that kind of Morricone twang to it. There's a track, Hotel Hell, which is very atmospheric, almost a Spanish Tex-Mex kind of feel to it. Lots of muted trumpets and Spanish guitar. So, it's all over the shop. There is experimentation galore on here, and thoroughly recommended if you like a bit of a laugh as well as listen to some really quality music, because it is great. It is good fun. And next, an album from 1970. This one, I think, is generally regarded very well. It's Glass Harp. And this features a guy called Phil Keaggy. He's an extremely accomplished guitar player. I think this record's beautifully recorded. And there's a lot going on. Much of this is sort of fairly dreamy, soft, tastefully orchestrated psych, with sort of sudden flourishes of acid guitar and some tasteful, restrained playing as well. There are flutes on here which add to the sort of dreamy quality of the music. There's some Beatles influences as well as the harder edge tracks. It's something you absolutely have to check out. Phil Keaggy went on to be a big light in sort of Christian music, I believe, but this is, if you've done nothing else, this is his legacy. This is fantastic. There we go. That's on that nice deco labels. So yeah, that one's reputation precedes it, and it's well earned. It's a great album. Another great album is Family's Music in a Doll's House, and this, a bit like the Eric Burdon album, is they chuck everything at it. It's not comical like the Eric Burdon album, but there's just so much going on. There's jazzy parts, it's very psychedelic, lots of studio effects going on. You've got Roger Chapman's strange, almost intimidating, warbling vocal, which almost sounds like Fergal Sharkey's evil uncle. And this is just such a good album. Such a good album. I mean, after this, they didn't do anything as psychedelic as this again. They were never mainstream rock, really. You can't be mainstream when you got a singer like Roger Chapman. But this is superb. Dave Mason had just left Traffic, and he came on board to produce this for them, and has done a really good job. Really good job. This is the mono original. I've got the on the Reprise Steamboat labels. I've got the stereo as well, and I've never done a sort of side-by-side listen to see what differences there are, but that's something I will have to do at some point. This isn't a relaxing listen. I don't think Family gave a damn whether people found it pleasant to listen to. They just had a lot of stuff they wanted to get off their chest, a lot of stuff they want to experiment with, and they certainly do that. It's a great album, and if you have only heard later Family and don't like it, forget about that. Give us a listen, because if you only have to have one album by them, this is the one to have, I think. It's great stuff. And then from 1972, we have Gong and David Allen's Continental Circus, their soundtrack to the film of the same name. And this is a really good listen, really good. Some scenes from the movie. And it's on the Philips label, original French pressing. Starts off with a track called Blues for Finley, which it's almost like a krautrock roadhouse blues kind of a track. It's definitely got that sort of vibe to it, and there is that sort of motoric krautrock feel to a lot of the material on here. Some of the tracks are sort of interspersed with sounds and dialogue from the film, and there's almost a Revolution Number 9 sort of sound collage feel to some of it as well. But more than anything, I think there's a lot of Pink Floyd from this era in it. Lots of that kind of Dave Gilmour style bottleneck guitar, and rolling tom-toms and hypnotic bass lines. It's a really good listen. I thoroughly recommend that one. It came just after they'd recorded Camembert Electrique, and before they started doing their Radio Gnome trilogy. So they were certainly in their groove. They knew what they were doing. It's a really good album. Next up, from 1968, it's Heir Apparent, from Ireland, in case you can't guess that. And their Sunrise album. And this was produced by Jimi Hendrix. And I have a feeling that he was brought in to give them some edge, because I get the feeling they came up through sort of swinging London mod scene, and a fair bit of that sort of sound still clings to him on this album. It's definitely more in the pop psych vein than the heavier end of psych. Hendrix also plays on it in parts. You have fun spotting which bits are him. It's pretty obvious. And it's a decent album. Very decent album. Like I say, you can tell that they've been part of the swinging London scene. They're still trying to shake off that that pop element of their sound, I think, and also the clean-cut image. You can see a couple of them have gone for the Hendrix-inspired hairdo, I think, to try and look a little more underground, a bit more edgy. And I guess that was the idea of bringing him in to produce as well. But it's a really good album. Some tasteful orchestration on here. Some nice studio effects. And yeah, very much recommended. The best track is probably Captive in the Sun, which is sort of sunny psychedelia, which probably wouldn't have been out of place on Forever Changes. It's got that kind of feel to it. So definitely worth checking out. It's just not as psychedelic as you might think it's going to be. It's definitely in the poppier end. And then we have a band who were active in the mid to late 60s. And that's Crystal Siphon. And tracks on this were recorded in 1967 and 1968, but weren't released at the time. And this didn't actually get released until 2012. And they were a bit unfortunate. I think they were shopping around for record deals and were offered deals, but they wanted to maintain more artistic control than the record companies would allow. So they just turned them down, and it just didn't happen for them. But they were quite big on the scene. I mean, if you see any posters from San Francisco venues back in the day, they're on the bill of the Grateful Dead, Big Brother and the Holding Company, Country Joe and the Fish, Creedence Clearwater Revival, you name it. So they were certainly capable, and the music on it was fantastic. And considering that most of it was just recorded on a 3-track in rehearsals, it holds up really well. It just shows what good musicians they were, because it's exceptional stuff. And in fact, the last 3 tracks on the album were recorded at the Fillmore West. So yeah, they're well worth checking out. They were from Merced, I think that's how it's pronounced, in California, which I think is about 100 miles sort of east of San Francisco, so well inland. And I think growing up in a small town, they just practiced and practiced and practiced, and they got really, really damn good. The influences, the most obvious in here are the Beatles and the Byrds, but they've got that real San Francisco acid guitar sort of sound to them as well. So I can thoroughly recommend that if you can get a hold of it. And there's actually a second album came out. What year was this? 2015. And it's more of the same. It's more rehearsal tapes and Fillmore West tracks. And it's just as good. Fantastic stuff. So do yourself a favour and track those down. Even though they didn't come out until the 2000s, it is definitely not neo-psych. This is the real deal. They just didn't get a record out back in the day. Now from 1969 we have Chicago's Aorta. Nice gatefold sleeve there. This is a concept album of sorts. I think the concept is to do with death and the afterlife. I seem fairly obsessed with it in their lyrics. The whole thing is kind of glued together with lots of strange segues between tracks. There's a few sound effects like crying babies and bubbling bongs and heartbeats, of course, and it makes for a very engaging listen. It does mean that it rewards the listener who sits down and listens to the whole thing rather than cherry picking certain tracks, and I think you'd want to anyway. It's such a good album, massively underrated. It's psychedelic, but it's the hard end of psych. It's pop psych as well. There's progressive elements. There are some horns and woodwinds, but again, not in that sort of blood, sweat and tears kind of a way. All done very, very tastefully. And in parts it's full on hard rock. Yeah, loud fuzz guitar, some great creative drumming, some Doors-like organ guitar interplay. I really can't recommend this highly enough. It's fantastic. The track Strange has a really great vocal hook. It's got everything going for it. Superb album. I think the artwork it's gruesome, but I think it's really effective. So yeah, get that one. And finally, from 1969, E Pluribus Unum by Sandy Bull. And this is on the Vanguard label. Now, Sandy Bull was known for being a folk musician more than anything, but this is his third album. It's very experimental, and it's obviously very influenced by the psychedelic sounds that were happening at the time around him, and by ethnic instrumentation. I mean, he's got very nice oud in his hands on the front cover there. And I love the fact that the record company just let him sit in the studio and make this album, because there are only 2 tracks on it. I won't even call them songs, because they're 2 jams, or they would be if it wasn't the fact that Sandy Bull plays all the instruments on them, so it can't have been a jam. It was all overdubbed. But yeah, they're not songs, they are atmospheric mood pieces, and atmospheric they certainly are. The primary instrument is electric guitar, but he plays the oud as well, and he plays the Indian bass drum, cowbells, cymbals, and it makes for a very atmospheric listen. 2 tracks. First track, side A, No Return, No Deposit, No Return Blues. It's a simple blues jam, but with heavily reverbed guitar and simple ethnic percussion. Very nice. But the B-side is where, for me, it really happens, and that's the track Electric Blend, which is sort of deeper Eastern ethnic psych. The oud is more obvious on here, and so is the use of percussion, which adds a much more of a sort of opium den atmosphere to proceedings, and it's a beautiful listen. I mean, I had no idea who he was when I saw this album, and I just saw that cover and thought, if that guy is not playing music that I love, I'll eat my hat. It's excellent. Really good album. And sleeve notes on the back are quite entertaining as well. And trying to describe this, I should have read this, because it actually says it would be directly contrary to the nature of Sandy Bull's Odyssey to try to dissect and footnote the various strains of what is, after all, an ongoing process of musical transcendentalism. Well, I couldn't have said it better myself. So yeah, that's definitely one worth checking out as well. So that's it for today. Hope you've seen something that interested you. Again, ton more psych that I can show you. I just want to show some stuff that doesn't get shown quite so much on the VC. And hope everyone's doing well. And take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye.